another one of my favorite things to talk about this Notre Dame football team is, obviously when you talk about how much better they've gotten from week 1 to week, however many games we've played, the defense is one of the things you talk about. I mean, there was some real concern at Notre Dame, especially if you watched that Florida State game or you watched them give up a couple of big plays in the home opener to Toledo and so on and so forth. But really, the defense has. I mean, if you can lose Kyle Hamilton and seemingly get better, or at least more effective. Now, I know Notre Dame hasn't played world beaters on offense, and that has a lot to do with it too. But still, I mean, you don't hold teams, I guess, out of the end zone in the month of November without executing a really good scheme, without having really good players. And right now, I think, like I say, the most important and the most noteworthy thing about this Notre Dame defense is that they can do it with anybody. They're going to give up some yards between the 30s, between the 20s a little bit, but this is how Marcus Freeman's defense was advertised. Mark Freeman was kind of, a boomer bust gamble type of a defensive coordinator. And that's, like I say, how it was advertised and how it's been advertised, throughout his time as a defensive coordinator. And, we've seen that today. Jack Kaiser became, the first defensive player to get into the end zone twice in one season since Julian Love in 2017. This is because obviously he returned that interception against Wisconsin. Obviously he got one today. Poetic justice for getting that fumble that wasn't a fumble on one play, and then I believe it was 2 plays later, intercepts it and actually makes it to the end zone on the next one. So, Marcus Freeman's defense put up 14 points today. I mean, they outscored, Notre Dame theoretically could have gone Waterboy offense and kneeled down the whole time and still won this game. So, Marcus Freeman, I know there was a lot of, he was built up as a great recruiter, and then it was like, oh my gosh, he's a great recruiter, but is he any good as a football coach? I think now the jury is no longer out. Marcus Freeman is indeed a good football coach who knows what he's doing. I don't know. I just think that the things that were said about him as a coach at the beginning of the season after a couple of weeks were unwarranted. And he's really settled in nicely to, calling a very nice defense for the Fighting Irish. So if you're just tuning in, this is the voice of college football, MarkRogersTV, coming to you after a very big, very convincing Notre Dame football win over Georgia Tech, 55-0. I'm your host, Ben Belden. And like I say, I'm solo here. The other kind of normal host, Nathan Urbach, was in South Bend for this particular game, so he was unable to join me. I decided to go solo here. So like I say, if you've got comments over the course of the next half hour or so that we'll be on here, or at least we're going to try to be on here as we kind of reach peak listenership right now. If you've got comments, please send them my way, because, if not, I'm going to get on rambling tangents and all of that. So if you got a question or something you want me to talk about, or an opinion you want me to react to, by all means, go on here and let me know what that question or opinion is. Because, like I say, I only have so much more to talk about. And I'm going to ramble here at some point. So, as we kind of, wait here and listen for some more comments, I guess, I've talked about some of the things that I've liked, throughout the season, from Notre Dame as they've improved from, a team that looked really, really, really shaky, throughout the season, to a team that, obviously is competing for a college football playoff. I mentioned the defensive line, and that being the number one reason why I think that if Notre Dame were to make the college football playoff against a team like Georgia, or a team like Ohio State, or a team like Cincinnati again, or whoever it is, Notre Dame's defensive line and their defensive line alone makes them at least have a chance against some of those teams. I mean, if you can't run the ball, if you can't get passes off, if you can't do those types of things like we saw today with a mobile quarterback who, Jordan Yates, who honestly feel a little bit bad for. If Notre Dame can win when they're on defense, if they can win the line of scrimmage, obviously that gives them a very, very good chance to win. So, that's exactly why I think Notre Dame, like I say, can be a college football playoff contender. Got another question here from Jonny Baze. What's Hamilton's status moving forward? I mean, I think that's anybody's guess, really, at this point. I mean, I know Brian Kelly has been in the media saying that, at one point he said, I expect Kyle Hamilton to play again. That was a few weeks ago. The more recent news is, and I forget his exact comment, but he essentially said, well, he's probably done for at least the rest of the regular season, and then we'll reevaluate what happens with him in the month of January or late December there, whether that means Notre Dame's playing in a college football playoff or a New Year's Six Bowl or whatever the situation is. Sort of sounds like Hamilton would want to play maybe if they were in the college football playoff. I mean, that's me reading between the lines. Maybe not so much if it was just a kind of a regular bowl game. But it's really hard to tell, that the injury that he has. I mean, I'm no doctor, but, Google told me that it's kind of a hit or miss type of an injury. Everybody reacts to it a little bit differently. So he's not been cleared to play. He probably won't play. I don't know. We'll see, as the rest of November unfolds, and then, that first week of December, getting the college football playoff ranking. We'll sort of see what the rumblings are on Kyle Hamilton. Emma Leahy says Coach Freeman is setting up for a head coaching gig. Can't disagree there, really. I think that I don't know. There's a lot of talk about that. And even Brian Kelly, there was the whole thing, before the season basically saying, my defensive coordinator is going to be the next head coach. And, there was the whole talk about, well, did he mean at Notre Dame? Is he the head coach in waiting at Notre Dame? Which he's not. I mean, not yet, at least. I think Coach Freeman is going to end up being a really good head coach someday. I genuinely hope he stays in South Bend. And, I think honestly, he's said that he doesn't seem like the type of guy that's just going to bounce, for 1 year. After 1 year, I guess is what I mean to say. So hopefully he sticks around. Hopefully he sticks around and becomes the next Notre Dame head coach after 2 or 3 more years. And when Brian Kelly decides to hang it up, that would be my optimal scenario. And I think there's a legitimate chance that happens. Like I say, there's been certainly he wouldn't be the first Notre Dame assistant coach to go one and done, and go somewhere else and where recruiting might be a little easier, and he's setting himself up for a head coach gig and all of that stuff. I'm looking at you, Mike Elko. So, but I don't know. I think that Marcus Freeman really likes his life at Notre Dame right now. Certainly if for some reason he were able to, go and coach at Ohio State, something like that, that would be hard for him to turn down. But anyway, we could talk about, Coach Freeman and his coaching opportunities, all over the place. Just reading through some of the comments that are coming in here. Obviously, talking about Emma's last name, Leahy. Obviously, if you're a Notre Dame fan, there's not a whole lot better last names to have than Leahy. Anyway, okay, sorry. And like I say, before I started getting into some comments there, what I was hoping to do is transition and talk a little bit about the offensive side of the football. I've made mention throughout this show, particularly that Notre Dame has really, really put it together at the right time. And, at the beginning of the season and throughout the season, we've heard Brian Kelly say things like this is going to be a transitional year for Notre Dame football. And he's been right. As you've watched, kind of the turning of the page for Notre Dame football. As the months has turned, obviously we're playing really well in the month of November. The defense certainly has played better because, like I say, you can't, they haven't given up a touchdown in the month of November yet, but really on the offensive side of the football, I think that's kind of the biggest place where we've seen such a noticeable turnaround, particularly on the offensive line. There were times throughout this season where people were calling for Jeff Quinn's head and that type of stuff. And people were just, myself included, just bashing on the offensive line. And rightfully so. I mean, it was bad. To get to a point to where they are now with that offensive line. And, it's almost baffling. Because you heard the things like, well, one of the things, the problem with the offensive line isn't talent, it's cohesion. And, Brian Kelly was quoted as saying things like, it's not a Jeff Quinn problem. It's a cohesion problem. It's an experience problem on the offensive line. I can't, and you always wonder, to what extent is that true? I think Notre Dame has very much proven that true so far. Mike McDonald has chimed in that says, I just can't recall a team that has made such a noticeable improvement week to week as this group. And when he says this group, I think he means, just the whole team in general. And I agree. And like I say, a lot of that just comes from, the offensive line playing so much better than, it was at the beginning of the season. I mean, it's hard to... Notre Dame didn't even look like it deserved to be ranked at the beginning of the year, beating bad teams like Toledo and Florida State, who is really, I thought maybe would end up being a little bit better than people thought they would be, beating, at the time struggling with Purdue, who has looked a lot better, losing ugly to Cincinnati, Virginia Tech, who just fired their coach. I mean, it truly is remarkable. I can't say it enough times in as many different ways that this team has made leaps and bounds in a way that's made this particular Notre Dame football season very enjoyable to watch. Like I say, it was not fun to watch Notre Dame football at the beginning of the year because you have certain expectations as a Notre Dame fan. And even when they're winning, sometimes it's hard to be real excited about an ugly win against a bad team. And now we're no longer at a point where we have to worry about ugly wins against bad teams, which is why, circling back to, what I talked to earlier, that, Notre Dame made a statement to the college football playoff today that they're no longer the team that lost to Cincinnati. They're no longer the team that, played with and almost lost to Toledo had it not been for, kind of a nice, remarkable drive. They're no longer the team that barely got by at Virginia Tech. I think this is a completely different Notre Dame football team that's playing really well on both sides of the football. And you're starting to see them all put it together. And